Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us are senior writer from ESPN, Mark Ogden, and the Times chief sports reporter, Martin Ziegler. Hello to you both. Plenty to get through in the morning's newspapers, including this in the Times. Lineker, why it's a good time to go. I think he's talking about match of the day. England's IPL hosting offer after season is suspended, and Pollock's rise makes him the Luke Littler of rugby. Loads to get through. The Telegraph, ECB, England and Wales Cricket Board open to hosting IPL climax. Henry is our Luke Littler. There's a few of the papers going with that line. Even his own teammates are gripped by Pollock mania. Roman Jolliday, Raducanu and Draper on the march at the Italian Open. We will get into all of that in the next half an hour. The Star, I'm happy to salute the champions. Gunners will provide guard of honour. Mikel Arteta doesn't look too happy, does he? Ruben's fight for places and Haaland hunger claims that have not gone down well with his Manchester City manager Pep Guardiola. What about the Mirror? We lost our hunger. There's that line again from Erling Haaland. City lacked desire, but his claim angers Bot Pes. And Ruben Amorim, the flack that Manchester United have received this season is deserved. OK, right, I think we'll start with the football, gents, and we'll start with those comments from Erling Haaland that the Express have gone really big on. Manchester City fans will be really excited by this news that Erling Haaland is fit and ready to return. He's, by his standards, had an off-season, still scored 21 goals in the Premier League. But this claim that Manchester City have fallen away because they lacked a little bit of hunger has irked, I think is the right word, Martin, Pep Guardiola.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a very sort of honest interview with ESPN, and we shouldn't be too hard on players speaking what they think is the truth, even if it sounds uncomfortable in terms of what their manager or what their teammates might want to hear. If that's his view, he should be allowed to say it. Obviously, it raises questions, and Pep Guardiola is going to be asked about it. And he said, "Well, if that's what his view is, then the players need to talk about it." And I thought he handled it pretty well, Pep. But there has to be some sort of questions about why they haven't performed at the levels that they have in recent seasons, and it's perhaps fair enough for Haaland to make ask those questions and state his feelings.
I remember Pep Guardiola making comments at the start of the season, Mark, where he said this would be their toughest season, to go off the back of something that no team had ever achieved. 4 Premier League titles in a row would be so hard to go again. And it's proved. They've had their injuries. But it does seem to be the wording that Haaland has used. As Martin says, very honestly, maybe we lacked a bit of fight, maybe we lacked a bit of hunger. Pep doesn't like it being spoken outside of the dressing room, perhaps.
Yeah, there'll be some of that. And maybe Pep takes it as a little bit of a criticism of himself and the fact that he's the manager, he's the coach who is supposed to motivate the players. And, maybe, Pep did seem quite grumpy today. So maybe Pep's just taking it a little bit personally and maybe thinking that those sorts of things are left between ourselves. I think he's actually suggested to Haaland that if you have that feeling, that sentiment, speak to the boys, speak to the players and discuss it with them. So I think he's challenging Haaland to maybe stir up the dressing room a little bit. But I think, like you said, City have won 4 straight Premier League titles, and that's the first time it's ever been done. And some of the greatest teams in history had won 3, the Man United teams, the Liverpool teams, and they couldn't go on. So there's a reason for that. It's because when you win so many trophies and titles, it's really, really hard to sustain it year after year after year. So I think City's dip has probably come a year later than we expected because they won the treble 2 years ago. So the fact they won 4 on the bounce is a testament to the quality in the squad. So I don't think it's a surprise. And also, I think we have to accept that this team's getting older. Kevin De Bruyne is leaving this summer. He'll be 34 in the summer. Bernardo Silva, John Stones, Kyle Walker, who's obviously left on loan to Milan, Ilkay Gundogan. There's a lot of players in this squad who've probably had a season too long at the club. So that's probably why the hunger's gone. It's not just the hunger, it's the case of that, physically they're not able to do it as they used to be able to do it.
Yeah, the Mirror have also gone with the same headline, "We lost our hunger." Erling Haaland hasn't played for a couple of months. He was injured against Bournemouth in the FA Cup. He'll be hungry, he'll be starving, and Southampton are quite a nice team to feast on, Martin.
Yeah, but it's it's going to be an interesting decision for Pep. I mean, Haaland would normally be his first choice, obviously, but will he throw him straight back in? Will he give him time to sort of get his match fitness back? He's got the FA Cup final coming up. So there's lots of questions, and I would be surprised perhaps if he starts straight away, because actually City in recent matches have been playing pretty well, I think. So perhaps he doesn't want to upset things too much.
Yeah, speaking about upsetting people too much, Mikel Arteta has been front and centre of the sports pages over the past couple of days following his claims he made after the Champions League exit for Arsenal against Paris Saint-Germain. We were the best team in the Champions League, Paris Saint-Germain told me, which Luis Enrique laughed off. There's a really interesting piece by Jamie Carragher in The Telegraph. He says, no more excuses, Mark. Arteta has to deliver or his reign will end. What's your take on this?
Well, I think Jamie's right. I think he has to win something now. Yeah, he has won the FA Cup as Arsenal manager. People forget that, but that was 2020. And I think this is a completely new team. It's a new project, as managers like to say. I'm not sure it'll be the end of Arteta if he doesn't win something next season, but absolutely the pressure is now on because it's almost like Arteta can't quite grasp or accept that his team hasn't won anything. It feels like it's not fair, the fact that this team has deserved to win something. Well, that's not really true. I mean, the teams that deserve to win something are teams that win something, and they haven't done that. They haven't managed to get over the line, and they run Man City close for 2 successive seasons, finishing runners-up. And this was supposed to be Arsenal's year, but it's not the year because Liverpool have come from nowhere, under a new coach and won the Premier League title. So Arteta's kind of trajectory doesn't really fit the reality that a manager can come in at a big rival and take the club to the title in his first season. So I think Arteta has to kind of look at himself as well. I think I was in Paris on Wednesday for the game, and as well as Arsenal played, they did seem to lack a little bit of the experience and the nous that we saw with Inter Milan 24 hours before. And Inter a very old, experienced team. Does Mikel Arteta like having experienced players around us? Does he want younger players who will just do as he says? And I think there's an element of that. He has to maybe release the reins a little bit, not be as much of a control freak as he's been labelled at times. Just let it go and let his team breathe, let them grow, and maybe add a couple of experienced players who can take that team to the next level. But yes, he's under pressure to deliver because you can't keep talking about winning things. You have to actually do it.
It's interesting you mentioned a little bit more experience, perhaps a little bit more nous on the playing side of things for Arsenal. But as a manager, Mikel Arteta, when he comes out and says things like he said in midweek, and in effect doubled down on Friday as well, Martin, when he was saying, I stand by my comments. Is that lacking a little bit of experience and nous when it comes to winning? He's been compared by The Sun of being like Rafa Benitez when he did his facts about all those years ago.
I mean, I think he's talking to the Arsenal fans and probably saying what they want to think, or the loyal fans anyway, not the ones that are critical of him. So that's probably why he's doubling down on his quite controversial remarks, I think. But I think it's not just Arteta. I mean, interesting what Jamie Carragher is writing there, but it's not Arteta whose head is on the block, or I mean, look, he didn't have it. Wasn't. The people who run the club didn't give him a new striker in the January transfer window for whatever reason. So he's had to work without a proper number 9, has he? Because Havertz got injured, Silva got injured, so Jesus got injured. I mean, so I think the fact that financially Arsenal are now in a much, much better place every season than when he took over, even though they haven't won any trophies since that FA Cup win, I think it's not next season or bust for Arteta, I don't think.
Yeah, I wonder if Arsenal and their fans will be looking at the Europa League final and going, well, that's annoying, because we've had a really good season and we've come up short, and 2 teams who've had terrible seasons could well win a trophy that will get them in the Champions League next year, Mark.
Yeah, and obviously, whichever one does win it will get in the Champions League. I think from Arsenal perspective, they don't want Tottenham to win it because there is a scenario where Tottenham can win the Europa League and get in the Champions League, and Arsenal can miss out on the Champions League by finishing 6th. I think it's unlikely, but the way Arsenal played recently, the next 2 games at Liverpool at Anfield and Newcastle at home, I think Arsenal will be quite thankful to play Southampton in their final game to get them over the line. But, 2 teams that are finishing close to relegation zone, potentially qualifying for the Champions League. But those are the rules. I know Arsene Wenger's not keen on it, but I think that is the rule. I don't think they can complain about it now. You can't change it throughout the season. But I think the team that loses the Europa League final is the team that will get what they deserve, because I don't think the winners will deserve a place in the Champions League. But the rules are the rules. If you win the Europa League, you qualify for the Champions League, and that's the way it is. So we have to get on with it, and I'm sure whichever one wins it will be delighted.
Yeah, Martin, you've written about this in the morning's newspapers. UEFA has refused to close the Champions League route for the Europa League winners.
Yeah, so I mean, Wenger said that the UEFA should review this rule, but the UEFA chiefs are absolutely refusing to do that. They think it's vital that it remains a reward for the Europa League winners. Some people might say Europa League's a bit of a weaker competition this season. You don't have the drop down from the Champions League. There's 36 teams in the Champions League instead of 32. So, yes, it is probably a weaker competition, but perhaps that's even more important that to try and make it relevant that the winner does get that reward of getting into the elite club competition for the following season and the financial riches that brings.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth pointing out that the Champions League is made up of clubs that finish second and third and fourth, and this season in the Premier League, fifth and perhaps 15th and 16th with whoever wins the Europa League. So is it not right then that the team winning the secondary competition, they are champions in their own right, Mark, that they get into the Champions competition?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I think you're right. I think, the days of the European Cup as it was being only about the champions are long gone. So there are teams that are qualifying for the Champions League, i.e. the Champions League, who've not won the championship for years or even ever. So I think we can kind of take it a little bit too seriously. It's a football competition at the end of the day. And I don't think UEFA will be too unhappy if Man United or Tottenham are in the Champions League next season, because big Premier League clubs generate lots of money, generate lots of interest from fans across the world in terms of, TV eyeballs. So I don't think it's a problem. I think, that's the rule of the competition. If you win it, you get into the Champions League. And also, if there was no Champions League prize at the end of the Europa League, I think the Europa League would be far worse than it is, because I think the clubs that were in it would be thinking, well, what's the point of winning it? We get nothing for it apart from a nice trophy. So no problem with it at all. They're the rules, and, let's just get on with it.
Yeah, it's a couple of weeks away still, Martin, the Europa League final. Huge game for both clubs. Who is it more important for of the managers to walk away with that trophy?
Yeah, what a great question that is. I think it probably Ruben Amorim, because so much was expected of him when he came in. And it's been a very, very disappointing few months since he took over. I think, this will give him some breathing space. I think he'll probably have a bit of breathing space anyway, because I think the days of sort of hiring and firing just like that are probably gone for the time being at Man United. But it would make a huge difference to how he starts next season, what the fans think, and perhaps if they got the money being the Champions League, perhaps they can get some better players.
Right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at more of the sports stories from the morning's papers, including this in the Telegraph. Newcastle risk fan backlash with a plan to replace the badge. We'll get into all that next. Mark Ogden and the Times' Martin Ziegler. OK, let's get straight back into it then for part two and focus on the Telegraph and a story north of the border in Scotland. Rangers looking at Steven Gerrard being considered for their managerial job. He went there with excellent success and then he went away, and now he's in a position where he needs to rebuild his career, Martin. What do you make of this link?
Well, it's certainly the place where he's had the most success as a manager. Very much adored by the fans there for what he did, and achieved on a fairly tight budget as well. So I'm not surprised he's in the thinking of the people running Rangers now. And I'm sure he would probably relish the idea of going back there, because he had such a good time there. There is always a danger, I think, when you go back somewhere that it's never quite as good the second time around, and maybe that will play into his thinking a bit too.
Yeah, maybe he's got the number of Brendan Rodgers, and Brendan could say it's not always that bad going back somewhere north of the border. He's done well at Celtic. Does he need Rangers to reignite his career, Mark? Because he had a pretty miserable time at Aston Villa and then went out to Saudi Arabia and similarly.
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously the move to Villa it just didn't work out for Gerrard. It was probably the right club at the wrong time. And obviously we've seen what Unai Emery's done since, and that probably doesn't help Steven's reputation either, the fact that Emery did so well. And obviously Saudi Arabia is a bit of a graveyard in terms of managers and players. We forget about them. So, he had success at Rangers, and they've obviously got new owners or new backers in terms of the 49ers group who are involved at Leeds. So maybe he looks at it and thinks that Rangers can compete again. He was the guy that ended Celtic's long run of title success, delivered the first title at Rangers for a long, long time. So, yeah, he's got a successful track record there. And it might be his best way back in, because in terms of clubs that might be interested in Steven Gerrard in England, I don't think he's going to get a club in the Premier League or the Championship that's got anything close to the status of Rangers. So I take Martin's point about never going back, but it might be the best option right now, because I just don't see a better one in England.
Also in that Telegraph story, some of the other names being linked are Gary O'Neill, who's been out of frontline work since leaving Wolves at the turn of the year, Rob Edwards, who's left Luton, Russell Martin sacked by Southampton. How attractive a job would Rangers be to those three? Martin?
Yeah, I think, obviously a very big club, chance of European competition as well. Gary O'Neill, I think, would be somebody who I would think be a very good candidate for them. Did really well at Wolves. I think he would be a pretty good fit, but for any of them really, because there's not that many big jobs knocking around. And if you go to one of the old firm clubs, you're in the spotlight, and you are at a really big club.
Let's just shift our attention to this story in the Telegraph. Newcastle risking a fan backlash with their plan to replace the badge. So when you hear the headline, you think, ooh, the fans aren't going to like that. But when you dig into it, they have sent a survey out to supporters. They've asked for feedback. It's understood that as many as 4 designs will be created and shared, and then a public vote will be designed. It does look like they're trying to get the fans involved in this. How do you think it'll land, Mark?
I read this story, I'm thinking there's a bit of a kind of a false outrage about this, because this Newcastle badge to talk about replacing, it's not a badge they've worn for 150 years. It's a badge that came in 1988. And since the end of the 60s, they've had 5 different club badges. So Newcastle have got form for changing their badge. It's not like it's a new thing. So I don't know whether it's just, fans wanting to moan at something because it's not what they like to hear. But if you dig deeper into it, it's not unusual. I think, and also, if you look at the Premier League since it started back in 92, 93, I think every club has changed the badge at some stage or another. Man City have changed it 3 times. I think Chelsea have done it 3 times. Clubs change their badges for a variety of different reasons. Mainly, it's just to kind of keep up with the times. I think if we look at some of the club badges from 50, 100 years ago, they're unrecognisable from there, because things change, society changes. So Newcastle's owners want a badge that is easier, apparently, to project around the world. And they can claim the copyright of it. So Newcastle fans probably just calm down a little bit. This badge isn't something that your grandfathers and great grandfathers wore. It's something that came into life before, just from when Paul Gascoigne started playing. So it's not the oldest badge in the world.
Yeah, I like the 80s Newcastle badge, which I think we can show on the screen now, with the N, the U, and the FC, and the little magpie in the middle. Martin, what I don't understand is on a PR front, why didn't they just say we want a new badge to commemorate winning a trophy, which we hadn't done in a football lifetime?
Well, perhaps you should get a job as their PR advisor, Chris. That's a good one. All these sort of heritage things are quite sensitive, and I think clubs are very aware that fans can sort of react badly towards them. But Mark makes absolutely the right point that a lot of clubs change them, and they change them regularly. This isn't changing the name. This isn't changing the ground. This is probably a tweak to the design. Spurs did it fairly recently. Did a really good new design of theirs, and you keep most of the historic elements. So it's just, I think it's probably a bit of a storm in a northeast teacup.
OK, so it's some way short of a Hull City Tigers rebrand then, by the sound of it, Mark.
Yeah, I remember Leeds had a rebrand a few years ago as well, and they had basically somebody's arm on the badge, and that lasted about 5 minutes when the fans were really angry about that. So you've got to get it right. But I think if they consulted with the fans, I think we know there's going to be a magpie on it, there'll be a river on it, and there might be a couple of black and white stripes, and that's a Newcastle badge.
Yep, so fear not, Newcastle fans, and they will be involved as well. Let's switch our focus to the cricket. England's IPL hosting offer after season is suspended. This is your newspaper, The Times, Martin. It's been picked up by a few of the newspapers. So the Indian Premier League has been suspended because of hostilities that are intensifying, it seems, between India and Pakistan. And the ECB has emerged as perhaps a replacement set of venues for the 12 remaining games.
Yeah, it's a really serious security situation in India at the moment. Obviously, we've seen on the news about the conflict with neighbouring Pakistan. So the IPL has been suspended. What's going to happen to it at a critical moment? Where does it go? I think many people would think that England was the obvious place, really, and the fact that the ECB is offering to host it. I can see it easily being snapped up. Where the other alternatives are perhaps the Middle East, South Africa, but I think England seems to be ready-made.
Yeah, there is a bit of a logistical issue if it were to just come in now, because all of the county grounds are being used for county cricket. But there's windows later in the year, Mark, and the Telegraph also suggesting that England and the ECB are ready to step in.
Yeah, and like you said, that the grounds are being used for county cricket, but money talks and crowds talk, and I think that the IPL games would get full houses, no problem whatsoever. County cricket games, maybe not. So I think it'll come down to basic, financial reality that the IPL is massive, much bigger than the county game. It's kind of, it's up there with the Premier League, the Football Premier League in terms of global resonance. So I think if things have to move to accommodate the IPL in England, it will happen because it's just such a big event.
Speaking about bums on seats, the latest rugby union sensation, Henry Pollock's been included in the Lions squad to travel to Australia. He's been compared to Luke Littler by some of his Lions teammates, his Northampton Saints teammates. This feels pretty big for the sport of rugby union that doesn't have that many crossover stars, Martin.
Yeah, I think he's only 20. He's had one England cap. Suddenly he's getting picked for the Lions. I mean, he is a phenomenon, once in a sort of generation type player. But I thought also his sort of personality and his character, I think that's what's going to project him to sort of superstar status. And rugby union really needs somebody like this, because there's not a huge list of people in English rugby or even British rugby who has that sort of profile, is there? I'm trying to think back, Johnny Wilkinson, but he was very much a sort of a retiring character. So Pollock could be just the sort of person the game needs.
Yeah, he's the youngest Lions forward selected for 89 years. He says, I'm not going into my shell. Is this a bit too much pressure to put on a 20-year-old man? Mark?
Well, everyone's got a different character, haven't they? I mean, I remember Wayne Rooney at 18 didn't seem to bother with any pressure whatsoever, even when he was 16. So it depends what his character is. And I think, in terms of rugby, it's always in England going to be dwarfed by football. And that's a reality. So the biggest football stars will always be bigger than the bigger rugby stars. But if he's got a personality, he's got a talent, and he's happy to share both together, he's got a chance of being a superstar. I think it seems that he has. He's certainly got the attitude. So maybe he could be England's rugby's biggest star since Johnny Wilkinson. I'm
sure the British and Irish Lions organisers will be hoping that he will be, because it feels like a sport that needs a new breakout star, Martin.
Yeah, absolutely, and not just within the UK, but sort of globally, really. Think of Jonah Lomu back in the 1990s. He really did sort of put the sport on the map. I mean, I'm not suggesting Pollock's going to be of his ilk, but I think he could make a really dramatic impact, and I think there's going to be a huge amount of attention on him, especially if he gets picked for that opening Test match.
Live on Sky Sports. Looking forward to it. Thanks for your time this evening. Really enjoyed it.
Great stuff, Chris.
Now, if you missed any of the show, there's a chance to see Back Pages tonight at hour, and the show is also available as a podcast. Just download Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. OK, coming up, we're going to hear from the Liverpool boss, Arne Slot. He's reaching out to Liverpool fans saying, go easy on Trent, after he announced this week he's leaving in the summer.